Alright, we are back for what we learned in round 2 of the 2025 Stanley Cup Playoffs. For those who don't know me, I'm Tristan Folks. In this video, we're going to run it just like the last video. We're going to review each series in one sentence, from the one that ended first to the series that ended last. Then we'll look into some stats, and I'll give a little more in-depth review. We also have to fix my bracket once again, so hopefully this is the last time we have to fix it. But thankfully it's not horrific, on one end at least. So other than that, let's get right into the series. So before we begin this, they talked about how home advantage was so big in round 1 of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Round 2, not so much. Let's get into it. The first series we're looking over is the Vegas Golden Knights up against the Edmonton Oilers. In Game 1, Edmonton surges once again in the third period to secure the first win of the series. Game 2, McDavid makes a fool out of Eichel and finds Draisaitl in overtime to hold off Vegas. Game 3, Vegas scores a late buzzer beater off of Draisaitl to get a game back in Edmonton. Game 4, Stuart Skinner shines bright and shuts out Vegas at home to put them on the brink of elimination. And Game 5, Kapanen becomes the hero in overtime for Edmonton to eliminate Vegas. We talked about Vegas in the last video about not having good starts. They didn't look any better in this playoff series, honestly. And then we also talked about Edmonton cleaning things up in the back. They have definitely done that. First off, we're going to look at a couple Vegas players of interest in this series. First one being Jack Eichel. In round 2, he didn't score any goals. He did get 5 assists, but he ends up finishing with a -4. Mark Stone getting knocked out of the lineup with an injury and not seeing Jack Eichel score goals. I understand Jack Eichel isn't a goal scorer completely, but you were definitely missing his goal scoring. And then Shea Theodore, who's a top defender on Vegas, also 0 goals, just 1 assist, but a -7. That's not very good for your top defender finishing with a -7 in round 2 of the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Possibly a big reason of why Edmonton was able to pull through. Not completely in my opinion, but a big possibility and a big number that you have to look at for sure. I talked about this player in the last video if I'm not mistaken, but Evan Bouchard was pretty reckless, I would say, defensively. And then in round 2, he doesn't get any goals, but he ends up getting 5 assists for 5 points, and he finishes with a +7. Much better than what he did against the LA Kings. I'd rather you have a plus something than a minus whatever he had in the previous series. And then Stuart Skinner, he ends up having to come back because of Calvin Pickard. He ends up finishing 2-1-0 in round 2 with 2 shutouts back-to-back in his last 2 games, 1.33 goals allowed on average, and a .944 save percentage. It makes his stats look really good for round 2, but for overall stats in the playoffs, they're still a little low. But overall, I believe it's going to be Stuart Skinner who's going to be between the pipes now. So I'm happy he can find some form back, and he's going to need to hold on to it for sure against Dallas. The next series we're going to talk about is the Washington Capitals going up against the Carolina Hurricanes. I talked to someone in my comments in the last video. I predicted this series pretty accurately, so I hope you're happy about that. So we're going to review this one really quick of what happened. Game 1, Carolina wins in overtime with a late goal in the third period in a low-scoring game. Game 2, Washington holds off Carolina to even the series, ending Carolina's streak of successful penalty kills. Game 3, Anderson shuts out Washington at home in a dominant win. Game 4, Carolina puts Washington on the brink of elimination after 2 insurance goals in the third period. And in Game 5, Svechnikov leads Carolina to victory with a late winner to eliminate Washington on the road. For the Washington Capitals, in the last video I talked about, is their depth going to show up? The answer was no. They did not show up at all. And when you're counting on your stars to score, you didn't really get it. Alex Ovechkin in round 2, he ends up only having 1 goal, 0 assists for 1 point, and ends up finishing with a -3. Dylan Strome, he ends up not scoring any goals. He gets 2 assists for 2 points, also a -3. And then you have Tom Wilson in the series with 1 goal, 1 assist for 2 points. And he just finishes with a 0 plus minus. So overall, when you count on your stars to score, when your depth isn't there, I knew this would be a problem in this series. And there it was. Washington got knocked out in round 2, just as I projected. We also talked about depth, and Carolina definitely showed that offensively. Line 1, they scored a total of 5 goals. Sebastian Aho had 0, however, but he still did pretty good. Line 2, they all split 3 goals, so that's about 1 apiece. Line 3, you got 1 goal from Jordan Stahl, I believe, in the last game. And in line 4, you had 2 goals, but 0 for Kakaniemi. But either way, everybody produced points. You need every line to be scoring. So Carolina's going to the Eastern Conference Finals looking really good right now. And for Frederik Andersen in round 2, he was lights out. He went 4-1-0. He ended up getting 1 shutout and a 1.2 goals against average with a .936 save percentage. I believe Frederik Andersen is the best goalie right now in the playoffs. He's going to be hard to stop coming up. So Carolina just needs to be Carolina, honestly. I know they allowed a couple of power play goals, but their penalty kill is spectacular still. And they got a good power play too. So definitely look out for Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals. The next series, we have the Winnipeg Jets and Dallas Stars. And for the guy who said I'm sleeping on the Dallas Stars in the comment section, I didn't disagree with you. In Game 1, Rantanen's hat trick in 8 minutes is the difference as Dallas defeats Winnipeg. Game 2, Winnipeg shuts out Dallas at home with Hellebuyck getting a shutout. Game 3, Dallas surges in the 3rd period with 3 unanswered goals, including Petrovic's game-winning goal that was allowed. Game 4, Granlund scores a hat trick with Ottinger standing strong for Dallas to put Winnipeg on the brink of elimination. Game 5, Hellebuyck shuts out Dallas in a must-win at home for Winnipeg to stay alive. And in Game 6, Harley scores a power play goal in overtime off the only penalty taken in the game for Dallas to eliminate Winnipeg. First off, I want to talk about Mark Scheifele real quick. Hope everything is well with him as he lost his dad the day of Game 6. Very cool to see him score a goal out there. I'm sure it had to really hurt being in the penalty box, honestly. But I hope the best for him, honestly. And I'm sure God will be with him. On the other hand, we also have that goal from Petrovic. I agree with the goal. You can say Hellebuyck knocked it in. I know that was maybe a controversy. I feel they did the best they could with that call to find something to not overturn it. We're going to look at some stats as well, obviously. The first one, we're going to talk about Connor Hellebuyck compared to being at home and away. At home, he went 2-1-0 with 2 shutouts, 1 goals allowed on average, and a .958 save percentage. But when he was in Dallas, he finishes 0-2-1 with a 3.33 goals against average and a .861 save percentage. Big difference. He picked up his Vezina form, honestly, at his home games, but when it came to the away games, it wasn't so much there. And then a couple players I wanted to shout out. Honorable mention to Nikolai Ehlers, but Kyle Connor in round 2, he ends up getting just 1 goal, but 4 assists, 5 points, and a +3. And Mark Scheifele in round 2, he also did a lot of good things. 3 goals, 2 assists for 5 points and a +5. Scheifele did very good. And we're going to talk about the powerful Dallas first line. They're all Finnish players. You have Roope Hintz, Mikko Rantanen, and you have Mikael Granlund. They combined for 8 goals in round 2, which is incredible. So that's a big pairing on the first line going into the Western Conference Finals. In Jake Ottinger, I question what he'd be like in the playoffs. He has a record of 8-5 with 2.47 goals allowed on average and a .919 save percentage. So Ottinger is doing very good right now, and he just needs to keep being himself going to the Western Conference Finals. Lastly, we have the Toronto Maple Leafs, or Toronto Maple Laughs, whatever you want to call them, going up against the Stanley Cup champions, the Florida Panthers. First off, I'm not going to talk about the garbage hits. I'm literally done talking about stuff. We talked about it enough between Florida and Tampa. Not going to get into it again. Game 1, Toronto holds off Florida's attempt at a comeback with Wolf relieving Stars in goal for the Maple Leafs. Game 2, Mitch Marner responds to a tying goal from Florida with a game-winning goal in the third period for Toronto. Game 3, Marchand scores a game winner for Florida in overtime off of Morgan Riley to get their first win of the series. Game 4, Florida shuts out Toronto to tie the series as Verhaeghe scores off the forced penalty in the first period. Game 5, Florida dominates Toronto with a big game from Bobrovsky to take the series lead. Game 6, Toronto scores 2 goals in the third period to send it to Game 7 with Matthews scoring the game winner. And in Game 7, Florida runs over Toronto in the second and third period courtesy of their bottom 6 and moves on to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think, personally, the goaltending injury to Toronto brought the team down. I still think no matter which goal you had, you obviously could have absolutely got to the Eastern Conference Finals, but I feel some things started playing into them mentally. They started wearing down in the series just like they did against Ottawa. And if you wear down against a team like this one, the Florida Panthers, you're probably going to pay the price, which they indeed did. I don't believe what was the problem. We're going to talk about him first. His stats, he was 3-3-1 with 1 shutout, 3.56 goals against, and a .886 save percentage. I felt the team gave up on him a lot. And then we're going to talk about a player that a lot of people threw a lot of heat at, Mitch Marner. In the playoffs, 13 games played, 2 goals, 11 assists, 13 points with a -1. This could be his last game as a Maple Leaf. I am not too sure. Personally, I think yes, but we'll have to see. But then you had William Nylander in round 2. He looked really good in the first 3 games, scoring 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, and ends up finishing with a -1. So he lost a lot of star power from Toronto as we went into game 4 through 7, honestly. In game 3, if they won, it'd probably be a whole different situation. I also want to talk about the Florida Panthers with their bottom 6. So throughout the series against the Lightning, they end up putting this crazy third line together between Luostarinen, Lundell, and Marchand. Ends up working greatly, so they've kept that line. And then once Florida went down 2-0 in the series, they completely changed their fourth line, and boy, did it produce pretty much immediately. You had AJ Greer, Thomas Noisek, and then you had Jonah Kuchovic. They all did what they needed to do because that fourth line looked pretty much invisible in round 1, and now their bottom 6 is honestly doing a lot of good. Line 3, they ended up scoring a total of 7 goals in round 2. That's a goal per game if you put that one together. And 2 of those guys are the Florida Panthers leading point scorers, and the other one's 4th. And for line 4, they end up getting 3 goals compared to whatever we saw in the round 1. So that's a big shout out to Paul Maurice on fixing his fourth line because it was really invisible. So it's good he can feel confident putting out a 4th line. So Florida has got better throughout these playoffs, but we'll see what they bring in the Eastern Conference Finals. Alright, so now we get to fix my bracket once again, just like last time. So instead of Toronto meeting with Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals, we had the Florida Panthers ending up going to Raleigh for Game 1. I'm still keeping Carolina all the way to winning the Stanley Cup, but the thing is, they need to actually win a game in the Conference Finals. I think they will definitely do that. They got the team. I already went over what their depth looks like. They look like a complete team right now. The Florida Panthers, on the other hand, I didn't talk about their top 6 because I didn't feel I saw enough from their top 6. So their top 6 needs to show up here, honestly, in my opinion. And Bobrovsky just needs to be Bobrovsky, not look like what he did in Game 1. So this one's going to be a tough series for sure. I believe I'm actually going to pull a Carolina in 5 on this one. I believe they can honestly get it done and get all the way there. So Rob Brendan Moore just needs to get wins in this conference finals, honestly. On the other end of the Western Conference Finals, we have the Dallas Stars up against the Edmonton Oilers. Sorry, Katy Perry fans. but Corey Perry is showing up instead. I may sleep on Dallas again, but I like to be consistent with my bracket, so I like how Edmonton has continued to improve. They got that star power and firepower. I understand Dallas is completely healthy right now. If Edmonton can continue to overwhelm teams late like that, and if they can find ways to pull Dallas apart, we'll probably see the Edmonton Oilers in the Stanley Cup Final back-to-back years, which is what I'm going for. But will they win it? I don't think so. This will be a rematch of the 2006 Stanley Cup Final, believe it or not, 19 years later. But I believe Edmonton will end up falling short in a 6-game series to Carolina. I said Carolina won the Stanley Cup in the last video, so I hope that makes sense. That'll conclude what we learned in round 2 of the 2095 Stanley Cup Playoffs. Hope you enjoyed this video as per usual. We have a lot of content coming out in June, so that will also include a Stanley Cup Final preview video for sure. And if I have to revise the bracket, we'll also do a what we learned in the conference finals as well, combined into that video. I also have a video coming after the NHL draft, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be another GM type of video with a different team. So we're going to have some more fun, probably some more collabs. So I'm happy a lot of people enjoyed that. And a lot of people in general are enjoying the hockey content. So if you want to see more hockey content, obviously, feel free to subscribe to this channel because I got you. Other than that, I hope you enjoy your day, night, or whatever it may be for you, and you take it easy. Take care.